Yeah.
And welcome once again to Half Hour.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, let's start from the very start. Who exactly is Madu Hamman?
Well, like you've introduced, my name is Madu Hamman. I'm the Managing Director, CEO of Abbey Mortgage Bank. I joined the bank in 1992 upon formation, and I'd risen through the various positions to the current position of Managing Director of Abbey.
Okay, what is your background? Have you always been in the banking sector?
Yes, I graduated in 1982, started my banking career in 1984 with the then Bank of Credit and Commerce, which later converted to African International Bank, till 1990 when I joined a merchant bank called New World Merchant Bank. And in 1992, I left New World Merchant Bank to join Abbey Building Society, which has now transformed to Abbey Mortgage Bank.
Yeah, what was the inspiration behind it? Something must have happened to move you in this direction.
Well, for those who are aware of the banking history around the late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of licensing of new banks, and so there was a lot of movement within the banking sector. But when the Mortgage Institutions Act was enacted in 1989, the promoters of Abbey saw it as an opportunity to provide housing finance to Nigerians. And so they formed Abbey Mortgage Bank and got licensed in 1992. So we commenced operation in Abbey in 1992, and we've been in the market since then. Of course, their main desire was to replicate what was obtainable in more developed economies like UK, where housing finance was quite affordable and available to the generality of the population.
How easy or difficult was it to set up?
It was very difficult because prior to 1991, when the first batch of mortgage banks were licensed, the only mortgage bank obtainable in Nigeria then was the Federal Mortgage Bank. So we did not really have enough depth of knowledge about mortgage banking in Nigeria. We did not have the required manpower and personnel to manage the sector. So most mortgage institutions that were licensed that time and came in thinking it was going to operate the way finance houses were operating, most of them eventually went under between 1995 and 1998 when we had the crisis within the finance industry.
Why did you? What made you? What made you start?
What made us to start?
To stand while others were going under.
Okay, so we started as a very conservative bank. The initial promoters had a lot of experience in banking. The pioneer MD, who had also worked, we had worked together in BCCI and African International Bank, had before coming back to Nigeria, worked with Bank of England. So she had a lot of experience with the financial sector. And so when we started business, we were not as reckless in investment as other mortgage institutions at that time. We took our time to make investment decisions, and that paid off eventually, because when the crash happened, we did not lose a lot of funds in the market.
What about the funding for starting up? Because there are a lot of people who are maybe listening to you right now and thinking, how easy or difficult would it be to start up, and where do you get the kind of financing, you know, that you need to actually start a thing like this?
Well, the initial capital at that time in 1992 was 5 million naira. So the promoters were able to talk to a few of their friends, and together they were able to put up the initial capital. And since then, we've been gradually increasing the capital as regulatory requirements continue to move up. Until 2005, when we had to open up to the public, and therefore we became a public limited liability company in 2005 and got listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange in 2008. And that gave us a wider market for raising of capital.
Is it a very competitive space?
I would say it's competitive, but the market is so vast that we are not even scratching the surface. So in terms of competition, I would say not really competitive, but the major competition still remains the commercial banks. The mortgage banks are trying their best, but because they don't have the resources that the commercial banks have, they're not able to really dig deep into the market.
Okay. Navigating COVID-19, a whole lot of people come out to say things like the new normal, which, as you know, has challenged a lot of businesses here and abroad. How have you been able to navigate this whole scenario?
Yeah, COVID-19 has really impacted across the economy. It's more severe in certain sectors of the economy. But eventually, as the finance sector, the impact from those sectors will, in the long run, hit the financial sector, because everybody, of course, banks with one institution or the other. So if the tourism sector is affected, the airline sector is affected, even the productive sector is affected, because during the lockdown, many people were not doing businesses. And eventually it will impact finance sector like us, because there will be loss of jobs, there will be loss of revenue. And so where you have facilities with various institutions and individuals, they might start to default, and that will create a ripple effect within the finance industry.
How do you see Nigeria's approach to mortgaging? Do you think we are somewhere up above the line or way below it?
Even at the African level, we are way below. Currently, the mortgage sector contributes to just about 0.5% of our GDP, compared to places like UK, where it's about 80%. Even places like South Africa have close to about 50 to 60%. Ghana, our next door neighbor here, has close to about 20%. So Nigeria has really not started. I would say we've started, but we've not really been able to scratch the market. That's why I said competition is not the issue here. It's our ability to meet the demand.
Okay. Do you think government has a role to play here?
Yes, government has a role to play in terms of providing the right environment for the mortgage sector to thrive. Currently, there are so many challenges that affect the sector, and most of these challenges have one thing to do with one or two things to do with government, like the Land Use Act, which makes the process of land acquisition very cumbersome and very expensive. And also subsequent transactions on land, like creating of mortgages, become very difficult and expensive because you have to first process governor's consent. You have to go through the whole bureaucratic process of registering the mortgage, and also the cost of registration is so exorbitant that most homeowners really don't want to go through the process. They just want you to maybe hold their document, and that doesn't give you enough security.
All right.
So other issues are mostly to do with the sector, like mismatch of funds. The Nigerian treasury market is mostly short-term in nature, except for a few institutions that can issue bonds. So we have to rely on short-term funds to grant long-term facilities because mortgages are long-term.
Okay.
So those are the challenges or problems we have within the sector. And I think the government can assist in reducing some of these challenges, apart from the legal framework for foreclosures.
All right, we'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll be asking you some more questions and checking if we have any questions or comments. Remember, you can be a part of this. We're a classic.
Thank you so much, Stefan.
All right, we have some questions here. The first question here says, why is it so difficult across Nigeria to access NHF loans? And the frustrations were trying to pay for my house. In the end, I paid out a pocket because the rates were so high and there were no guarantees that the NHF loan would ever come through. You want to answer that question for us?
Okay. So the process for application of NHF is the Federal Mortgage Bank is the custodian of the National Housing Fund. So for a contributor to be able to access facility from the National Housing Fund, he has to approach a primary mortgage bank, who then processes his requests and forwards to Federal Mortgage Bank for approval. The process is cumbersome because first, the applicant has to ensure that all his required documentation are complete and proper. And then the processing at the mortgage bank level can then commence. The process includes checking the property that is involved in the transaction. Does it have a proper title? The applicant, what is the source of income? Would he be able to meet repayment of this? So all these processes are done at the primary mortgage bank level before it's forwarded to Federal Mortgage Bank for approval. And then Federal Mortgage Bank also goes through its own process of checking. So that's why the process is long. But in terms of pricing, I won't say it is expensive because the initial cost of all these checks might be high, but eventually the rate at which you get the facility is only 6%, which is the lowest facility you can get in the Nigerian market right now.
Okay, but what about partnership now? How do banks partner with, private sector providers?
Yeah, most of our partnerships are with real estate developers who provide the houses for us to be able to grant mortgages on. So most of the partnership might start with credible developers who have housing types that will meet the requirement of our customers. So if they approach us with such projects, we might be able to give funding for such projects and then eventually grant mortgages to people who will buy into such projects. So we have partnerships with credible institutions. We also have partnerships with notable cooperatives whose members want to access housing finance. So we do work with private other private sector concerns.
Okay. All right. Before we get back to you again, there's another question here from Okechukwu Progress. It says, in tackling the government's end of the issue, have the players in this sector come together to propose a bill or constitutional amendments with respect to improving their plight? If yes, what's the update on this?
Yeah, the issue of addressing the various problems with the mortgage sector started as far back as 2001, I think, when the then president, Olusegun Obasanjo, formed a presidential committee to review the various legal framework around the mortgage sector. And there were legislations that were presented to the National Assembly for like amending the Land Use Act, trying to change some of the legal framework for foreclosure, and so many other issues concerning the smooth operation of the mortgage sector. But each time, with the lifespan of each assembly, before the approval for such amendments will happen, there will be a change in assembly. And when that happens, you have to start from scratch. So our advocacy from the industry, as we have the Mortgage Banking Association of Nigeria, which propels all the members and also takes care of most of these issues of advocacy. We also have institutions that have come up of recent, like the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company, which is partly owned by the banks, the participating banks, and partly owned by the federal government through the Federal Ministry of Finance. And then CBN is also involved. So they too, they've been doing a lot of advocacy in trying to address the issue of the challenges within the sector. They've been talking to even state governors to see how each state can amend some of their laws to make it easier and smoother for mortgage transactions to be concluded. There are some proactive states like Lagos State that has been very cooperative. In the north, you have Kaduna State too, has shown a lot of interest in assisting the sector, and the engagement continues with various other states that are willing to participate in the provision of housing for their citizens.
All right. It then appears that we have a bright future if we're looking at that lane now. But talking about the future, where do you see your business in the next 10 years?
Well, Abbey has a very good pedigree, having been in the market for almost 29 years now. And currently we are the oldest and arguably the largest mortgage bank in Nigeria. And we will continue to build on that platform. And we see ourselves in the next few years, 2 to 3 years, we see ourselves as clear industry leader within this sector. We are currently doing rights issue, which opened on 4th of January for our existing shareholders to invest more in Abbey. We're trying to reposition the bank for growth in the next 3 to 4 years. Already in 2020, we've been able to grow our balance sheet by up to 80%. And we will continue to move on that trajectory for the next 3 to 4 years. So in 10 years' time, we see Abbey being the largest mortgage bank in Nigeria.
There's a question here for you. It says, why is it so difficult for Nigerians to access the National Housing Fund?
I would say it's not difficult, but the process is cumbersome.
It's difficult.
It's cumbersome because of what I explained the process to be, that yes, if it were at the mortgage bank's level for you to get approval, then it would be faster. But it has to go to the Federal Mortgage Bank that manages the fund.
Okay.
And they have to exercise extra caution in making sure that the mortgage bank that has submitted the application has done a proper job of assessing. Yes. So it's double checking. So the process is longer. But if you have the right documents to start the process, the turnaround time will be much shorter.
Okay. All right. Time is not our friend here on brought to you by Unity Bank. Before we let you go, I'm sure you wake up in the morning with some kind of guiding lights, quotes, or mantra. But what is it that guides
you? What I like about mantras is they act as a guide to propel somebody for greater achievement. And I like a quote by Nelson Mandela that says, "It always seems impossible until it's done." That shows that you should continue to persevere. You should never give up. We've seen a lot of changes coming up within every sector of the economy. A few years back, I'm sure nobody would have thought telcos will be competing with banks for payment solutions. They are now there. It's because they've invested in technology and they've seen an opportunity within the market for them to play a role.
Yes.
So if you give up too early on your own plan, then you will never succeed. But if you continue to persevere and continue to invest in innovation, then there's no impossibility.
All right. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Atta.
All right. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. That was Madu Hamman, Business Half Hour. We don't see her this morning here on Classic FM 97.3. He is the Chief Executive Officer, Abbey Mortgage Bank, PLC. Remember, Business Half Hour comes your way every Monday at 8.